A war monitor says Islamist fighters have entered and taken over a number of districts in Syria's second biggest city, Aleppo. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reports heavy fighting between rebels and government forces. Syria's military says it's inflicted heavy losses on the Islamists who've been advancing on Aleppo for days now. They've also taken control of strategic towns along the way. The observatory said Syrian and Russian warplanes have bombed the rebel enclave of Idlib. The escalation in fighting comes after weeks of simmering violence. Let's take a look at the groups involved in the offensive and why it's happening now.
Major fighting erupts again in Syria's civil war. A day after staging their surprise attack on government-held positions in the north, the rebels moved on to Aleppo, shelling the city. Syrian state media said the army, backed by its ally Russia, responded with airstrikes on insurgents' positions in the Aleppo and Idlib countrysides. The Syrian army says the assault is being led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, a militant group which controls much of northwestern Syria. The HTS is led by al-Qaeda's former Syria branch. It consists of multiple different insurgent groups, some with Salafist and jihadist ideologies. Many reject the influence of foreign forces such as Turkey, Russia or the United States, but others approve. It's a complicated coalition, but what does unify them is their opposition to Syrian leader Bashar Assad.
I've been displaced for 5 years, but thank God I'm now fighting to reclaim our land from the grip of the criminal regime. We will persevere on this path and call on young people to join us in the struggle to take back our country.
Since 2020, the HTS and other rebel groups have been mostly based in the Idlib province. The area was subject to a Turkey and Russia brokered truce. But outside of Idlib, there are large parts of Syria still controlled by rebels opposed to Assad's government, including along the border with Iraq. US-backed Kurdish forces maintain large parts of the north, and Turkey, along with the Syrian National Army, control a so-called buffer zone along the Turkish border. With the offensive, the rebels may be trying to capitalize on the other conflicts currently raging elsewhere, with Assad's ally Iran reeling from Israel's offensive on Hezbollah in Lebanon, and with Russia's resources stretched with its war in Ukraine. But the offensive and the Syrian government's response has left many civilians in the firing line. Groups of refugees have been fleeing the fighting, heading to shelters in the Idlib province.
People started leaving, but we stayed until the morning. As I was preparing breakfast for my children, a plane flew overhead. As soon as we saw it, we ran into the desert.
The United Nations is calling for an immediate de-escalation and an end to the most intense fighting northwestern Syria has seen in years.
Nanar Hawash is a senior analyst for Syria at the International Crisis Group. Good to see you, Nanar. Now, the government seems to have been taken by surprise by this rebel offensive. Did you see it coming?
Yes, it was a bit anticipated, this offensive. Even government forces, as well as Russia, were conducting preemptive attacks the last several months to try to prevent this offensive. What took us by surprise is the success and how quickly rebel groups managed to gain control of land, villages, and reach Aleppo city.
What do you think is behind that? Why were they so successful in their advance?
I would say there's a couple of reasons. The first, the government forces were extremely weak in defending the outskirts of Aleppo. They quickly routed. They did not hold much of a defense. Keep in mind, around 50 villages were taken over a bit more than a day. The rebel groups were preparing, training, and planning for months for this attack. So I would say it just comes down to rebel groups were very well prepared for this attack, while government forces were not. Yeah.
You say there was a way to see this coming. Why do you think they launched their attack now? How related is the timing to other conflicts in the area and around the world?
Yeah, very good question. I would say there's two main reasons. The first one is internally. So the HTS's legitimacy and popularity was decreasing in Idlib. And they want this, any win, any offensive could regain this popularity. The other reason, which is the main reason I would argue, and the bigger one, is the more geopolitical one. So you have the government's allies, the axis of resistance, Iran, Hezbollah, are weakened because of the conflict with Israel. Israel has been bombing Iranian and Hezbollah assets in Syria for the past year on almost a daily basis. Hezbollah pulled troops from this same exact fronts. They pulled troops to compensate for their losses in Lebanon. And finally, Russia, Syria's most important ally, they pulled their weapons, they experienced personnel to Ukraine. So the rebels saw this as an opportunity to start this operation.
Yeah, you said it there. Normally, Assad would turn to Putin in a moment like this. How big a role can Russia play right now to support the Assad regime in pushing back the rebels?
I would say, although Russian airstrikes or Russian presence has been weak right now, the last several days, it has not been a game changer. However, that said, I still view Russian presence on the ground will still be a game changer. If Russian airstrikes, if Russia decides to up its airstrikes and its presence in the skies, I think this will be detrimental for Assad and for government forces. However, it is very important to highlight that a lot could happen, especially this week.
Doznana Hawash, Senior Analyst for Syria at the International Crisis Group. Thank you so much. Great speaking to you.
Thank you for having me.